So you came to the mansion thinking we're going to be centerfolds, I'm going to be on a TV show, we're going to live in the mansion. But the reality was different than the fantasy. You had rules, you were watched constantly. And yet that wasn't the worst thing that happened to you, was it?
What it is, ho, what's up?
Who really is Hugh Hefner? It's so interesting how a man could blatantly flaunt a ring of women who he's having sex with, and somehow he's regarded as some legend who was about the sexual liberation of women, while profiting from sexualizing them at the same time. That's not weird to y'all? Cause I could tell you who can't do that. I really think Hef embodied the fantasy of men. A lot of guys do things for women, the attention, the adoration. They want women to flaunt to them. Hef lived the fantasy life. I can see why he was idolized, but a man of that nature considers a woman a dime a dozen. This man saw women as purely transactional. There's a lot of stuff coming up about him after his death some years ago. It's just so crazy that it took his death after living this life for damn near 50 years to really expose all the weird stuff he's done. It's well known that a lot of the Playmates had to sign NDAs once they agreed to be his girlfriend and move in. Since his death, a lot of the former Playmates are now telling their stories. They are detailed about living under his rule and the control he had over them. This absolutely goes against the legacy he wanted to be remembered for, because he himself wanted to forever be remembered as this great man, etched into the culture as the ultimate playboy. And indeed, that's what he accomplished, but whatever happens in the dark always comes to light. And although he was a playboy, he was also an odd individual who didn't want to die alone, because he chose not to settle down and find a woman that truly loves him. But then again, that's what he chose. He had women in his life who loved him, but he chose the playboy lifestyle instead. Although he did live this extravagant life, he did have a fear of death. He tried to compensate getting older by scrapbooking his life in a 2400 collection of memories. His empire turned into him constantly needing to feed his ego. He felt untouchable, he liked the attention he got from the show and having so many women on his arm. Living under Hugh meant living under his system, and he was entitled to you. You had to look a certain way with the bleached blonde hair, have titties, and obviously be young. He had a serious sex addiction and routinely fulfilled his desires. He often invited girls to his house randomly, and most girls that had troubled lives and were hoping for something better or some stability. He would give the girls an allowance of $1,000 a week, clothing, and beauty allowance. He marked in a black book to keep track of who he had given money to. Playboy staffers would use a book to keep tabs on when the women left the mansion and returned every day. They had a 9 p.m. curfew and weren't allowed to have jobs, stripping them of the ability to make money elsewhere.
Every week we had to go and ask Hef for our allowance.
You would have to go to Hef's bedroom, Friday morning.
We usually like to go at least in twos. Zoe and I would usually go together.
Sit on his bed and say, "Hi, honey, I'm here for my allowance," which was $1,000 a week. The wardrobe allowance was $2,000 for any events or any parties that were being held at the mansion.
And what about the people who say it's prostitution?
It's not prostitution. I was working for a company, and I was simply looking at Hef as, I want to work for you and your company. I want to help make your company better if I can in any way.
It was a two-way street.
Yeah.
We had to follow the rules, and he had to perform certain obligations to us. We got the allowance, he paid for certain things for us, covered insurance, bought us cars. He needed us to be at his side and look pretty, right? So, and
it's a trade.
So it was a two-way, it was understood. I mean, we just knew that we lived in his world and we had to follow the rules.
The girls were not allowed to appear in Playboy magazine because once they did, they often left him, so he made sure to keep their visibility at bay. If any of the girls were out of town for any reason and missed one of the official going out nights, he wouldn't want to give them an allowance. He had a weekly routine where he would have sex with his girlfriends on Wednesdays and Fridays, after they had gone out to the nightclub. That routine felt like a chore to the girls. He would have them all in the room to take turns. There were bi-weekly orgies. Most of the girlfriends would mime sex with each other and be high on quaaludes, which Hef would call thigh openers. On these nights, it would involve simply standing there and putting on a show to create a fantasy that something was going on. All the girls would be there, and since Hef couldn't really hear well out of one ear, they would often talk and gossip while they made fun of what was happening, which was pretty awkward because not everybody got along. Since Hef didn't like using protection, this often meant the ladies would pass STDs to each other, like chlamydia, and often get yeast infections because he only liked to use baby oil as lube.
I was still just gonna watch.
Okay.
And then she was like, aren't you gonna, that same girl was like, aren't you gonna go? It's like, you need to go. And I was like, I would rather not. And I'd seen what everybody else was doing, so I knew that this was like a 10-second thing. After that first night, like when I tried not to do it, after that, I wanted to be first because there was no way I wanted going after other people.
Right, because that was the other thing is they said it was no condoms, so you all could possibly have spread something unintentionally.
Everyone's in the same situation,
yeah,
and there is a doctor on staff.
Some of the girls like Kendra, who was featured on Girls Next Door and began dating Hef when she was 18, said she didn't know that sex was involved. She said she stayed there for weeks until she finally had to have sex with him, and when she did, it felt like a 1-minute chore she had to do. In order to participate, she had to indulge in alcohol and weed to get her through it. This also meant recruiting other girls into the bedroom. Most times, Hef would ask or the girls would do it so it wouldn't be their turn that night. Twins Christina and Clarissa Shannon alleged Hefner assaulted them as teens. He refused to use condoms and got one of them pregnant. They assumed that they were just going to be a part of the show because this was around the time that Kendra, Holly, and Bridget were leaving their role as Hugh's girlfriend. So they agreed without knowing that they really had to be intimate with him. When they moved into the mansion, it was months until they had to have sex with Hef. On their 19th birthday, that's when Kendra basically put them in Hef's room and left them with him alone.
Hugh Hefner needed girlfriends. The twins thought that this was just for show, that it was for the show. They thought everyone was acting. They did not know that the girls were indeed girlfriends that would have to do the things that a girlfriend would do. So they accepted the position thinking that it was just for them to be on the show. It would just be a role that they played when Hugh Hefner went out to events. Just a pretty girl, on Hugh Hefner's arm, not anything more than that. So they agreed and they flew out to LA and moved into the mansion. They said it was about 6 months into living there when they realized that it was not just for show and that they were actually expected to have a sexual relationship with Hugh Hefner. They say it was on their 19th birthday party where they were forced to perform oral sex on Hugh Hefner. The girls say when they first got there, Kendra was already pregnant, but nobody knew. Holly was already staying in another room down the hallway, and Bridget was getting ready to leave as well. So they transitioned to be Hugh Hefner's main girlfriends. They took part on the show, and they said at their 19th birthday party was when they finally realized that they would actually have to have a sexual relationship with Hugh Hefner. Now, for their party, the Playboy family all went out to celebrate. They went to a nightclub. They said Holly was there. Kendra was there. They go to this nightclub. They're having fun. They're drinking a lot of alcohol. The girls said on their way back to the mansion that Kendra actually asked them if they wanted to smoke weed when they got back to the mansion. So they said when they got back to the mansion, they went up to Hugh Hefner's room thinking they were going to smoke weed. After they got there, Kendra actually walked them into the room. And once they got into the room with Hugh Hefner, Kendra actually left them in there. Now, in my personal opinion, that is an issue, which Kendra was not very old herself, but I feel like she just kind of fed these two young girls to Hugh Hefner. Like, she literally baited these girls in, asked them if they wanted to go up there to smoke weed, knowing that was not going to be the case, and brought them and just delivered them to Hugh Hefner. The girls said after Kendra left, they started getting uncomfortable, to which they felt like Hugh Hefner picked up on that because he offered them pills. And they both took, they said multiple pills. It wasn't just one pill. They said they took pills, which obviously made them feel extremely drunk. One of the girls referred to it as like, we were wasted. They said they were sitting on each side of Hugh Hefner when he took their heads and forced them down on him. They said that was the first time that they ever were involved in a sexual act, with each other.
Although they were uncomfortable, they stayed because they had a sick mom and they didn't want Hef to take away their magazine covers and allowances. They felt like they built something for themselves and that Hef could take it all away in a second. The Playmates did indeed have privileges like in-home staff, cars, allowances, and beauty budgets, but they were under constant surveillance. Anyone who entered the Playboy house had zero privacy. You may think you do, but there's loads of hidden cameras, microphones, hidden underground tunnels. Hef created tunnels in the 70s, which was called evacuation tunnels. But these tunnels were connected to celebrity homes in LA like Jack Nicholson and Kirk Douglas and a bunch of celebrity homes. Hef's house was littered with cameras that documented everything. He had tapes and videos of orgies and drug use to use in case anyone threatened to reveal what was going on inside the mansion. He would let the media into all the parties on purpose because they usually end up doing something they'll regret. Nobody was safe from potential blackmail. He had a lot of nude and salacious photos of the Playmates in order to keep the ladies in line.
It was hard for me. I started cleaning and I started getting rid of stuff. He kept everything. I found all those in the attic. What? Yeah.
I did wonder where those pictures would land after he died. Who gets those photos?
You thought of that.
Yeah, I did.
And they were literally just in the attic in a drawer.
Holy shit.
He was a hoarder. Like, you know those piles in his room where, like, it was just, like, filled with,
oh my God,
like, old tapes.
Wow.
And I saw everyone that was in them. I'm like, okay, if I was in those photos, I'd want them ripped up. And so I ripped them up.
Oh.
You could feel safe.
I really appreciate that so much. And more than you know.
I'm glad I did it.
I do know what the photos are that she's talking about, that she ripped up. And let's just say, I'm really very proud that she did that. We definitely probably wouldn't like those getting out. So Crystal ripping those pictures up is a huge deal. And she's kind of a hero.
Hef was really into weird orgies and bestiality. He would sometimes pressure some of the Playmates to perform in odd fantasies. Linda Lovelace, a 1970s adult film star, was drunk and drugged and forced into an orgy with Hef's male friends. Out of nowhere, a German Shepherd shows up. They got her so inebriated that they made her give the German Shepherd oral.
Hef came out and he was like, oh my God, this is impossible. She's cuter in real than she was in her pictures. How can that be?
Well, this is definitely Miss September.
Oh, I think so too.
One of Theodore's more shocking claims involved the Playboy magazine founder's alleged fondness for bestiality.
I walked in once and he was to my dog, our dog, and I said, what are you doing? He said, well, dogs have needs. Stop that. Just stop that. And I never left him alone with the dog again. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I could not believe what I was seeing.
Snotty nose.
Sandra Theodore, who dated Hef in the late 70s, said that his sexual demands became so outrageous to the point you could never satisfy him. By the time Hef was in his 50s, his sexual desires grew more and more to the point enough wasn't enough. Sandra said that during her time with Hef, he broke her like a horse. He would hire porn stars to come into his bedroom and have sex with women living at the mansion while he watched. She would consume drugs and alcohol to get through these orgy sessions, feeling violated and manipulated that a man she was with would be okay with other men touching her. It made her feel horrible about herself. The mansion had a cleanup crew that would come and clean up leftover mess from the parties. This was to make sure scandals such as overdoses, deaths, and sexual assaults remained under wraps so they wouldn't damage the Playboy's image. They had to make sure nothing would be released to the press or police. The cleanup crew would also sterilize the toys used during these events to reuse them for another night. A lot of what happened at the Playhouse leaves room for a lot of regret for the Playmates. For years, the girls were left open to harassment, drugs, alcohol, and embarrassment for the sake of living this fantasy life that no longer serves a purpose in their life today. Holly, Hef's #1 girlfriend, spent 8 years with him. She eventually revealed that the lifestyle almost led her to off herself. What stopped her from leaving earlier, according to her, is the amount of videos and nude images he had of her doing crazy stuff. Apparently, what Hef would do was take embarrassing pictures of the girls while they were drunk and naked and make copies to pass to the other Playmates.
When I lived at the mansion, I was afraid to leave. Something that was always lingering in the back of my mind, I think since the very beginning, was that if I left, there was just this mountain of revenge porn just waiting to come out. When you would go out with Hef, he's taking all kinds of naked pictures of these women when we're wasted out of our minds. And he would print out like 8 copies for him and all the women, and he would pass them around. And it's just gross.
You know, for laughs and giggles, I guess, which I'm sure was an awful feeling. You can say a lot about the Playmates, like they knew what they were getting into and they should have been smarter than that, but if we're being honest, two things can be true at once. They indulge in stuff very young and now have regrets about it now that they're older and want to move on with their lives.
Time really does do a lot of weird things. You go through time and perspectives start to change, and you know, your ideas start to change about why. You start asking why. Why did I do that? Why did I have sex with a 90-year-old man, or like at that age? You know, why did I do that? Like, why did I go to the mansion in the first place? Why did I get boobs? Why did I bleach blonde my hair to be like, why did I, you know, it was all, I was going down this crazy regretful path that I don't think I needed to do, but I was going down that path. And I was like hoping that the world didn't see me like that entering real estate. You know, I'm like, oh my God, this is not who I am anymore. I'm a single mom of two now, like I'm starting a new business. Those were different times. They were different times. They were like my wild times, my wild 20s.
Hef, because of his affiliation to powerful people and his high status, he got away with a lot of things. Although he was evidently objectifying women, he was also able to keep a squeaky clean image even though what he was doing was perverted. In 1975, a 10-year-old Brooke Shields posed for Playboy for a Sugar and Spice campaign. These photos were absolutely inappropriate. Brooke nude in a bathtub. She was standing covered in oil with heavy makeup on. Her mother signed away the rights to the photos, and Brooke at 10 was the youngest to ever do Playboy. The intention was for her to look like a sexy woman at the age of 10. He never denounced them, but these photos were published for millions to see. There were murders associated with the Playboy mansion that didn't get pressed because of who Hugh Hefner was. He was able to conceal things that would mess with the Playboy's image. Paige Young, who was a playmate, was tired of being abused by the men affiliated with Hef. So she decided to write Hugh Hefner is the devil on the wall and unalived herself because she was hoping it would bring awareness to the industry.
Hugh Hefner and the Secrets of Playboy. For some reason, my trigger warning triggers men, but I still need to do a trigger warning because the topics that we are going to be talking about are very fucking important. On April 7th, 1974, Melanie Myers went to go check on her friend and neighbor, Paige Young. Paige Young was a struggling artist, turned out to be the girl next door. She was Miss November of 1968, Playmate of the Month. Melanie was really worried about her friend because just recently they had a conversation. Paige was really heartbroken and just devastated and just had enough over the sexual abuse that she had encountered at the Playboy mansion, so she confided in Melanie. At the end of the conversation, Paige said, "Look, I've had it, I'm leaving." Melanie thought what she meant was that she was leaving the state or she was going back to her hometown, and unfortunately that was not the case. Melanie got worried. She went over to her home. Melanie found Paige in her room laying over a bloodied American flag. Paige shot herself in the head with a .38 caliber. Across from where she was laying was her wall, and on this wall she had a collage of Hugh Hefner pictures, newspaper articles, everything. And above this collage, she writes in big bold letters, "Hugh Hefner is the devil." Paige Young also left a suicide note, writing a list of men that sexually abused her. This was including Hugh Hefner. This was including John Huston. You might not know who John Huston was, but he was an actor, a film director, and a producer. You might know his celebrity daughter and actress, Angelica Houston. Why don't you hear about John Huston? Because John Huston passed away in 1987. I think Angelica knew. Absolutely not. She was so young. I don't want to hear that Angelica needs accountability. She was a fucking child. When Melanie found her body, she instantly called LAPD. LAPD came over, and in 2 days, they completely cleaned out Paige Young's home. There was not one article about it. It was completely hidden from the press. Until about 2013 or 2014, the Daily Mail has the case report about it. So if you want to go look, there you go. Paige Young thought in order to make a difference, she would have to kill herself so she could make that difference within the sex industry and within Playboy, but it ended up never happening. Of course, when the articles came out in 2013, 2014, do you think that Hugh Hefner made a statement? Absolutely not. We see a pattern here. How many deaths have I spoke about when it comes to this series? Talked about Bobby Arnstein, Dorothy Stratton. I haven't even talked about Adrian Pollock. She died of an overdose. You didn't know about them because they were all hidden from the press. I wonder why. This was a significant problem within the Playboy walls. No one could help these girls. Absolutely no one could help these girls. Yet you guys want to say, oh, these girls knew what they were doing. Really? Melanie talks more about how there was a sex tape that Paige did not want out with a celebrity. These women begged and pleaded Hugh Hefner to not film. He said he wouldn't film, and he ended up doing it anyways. He had film on everyone, even the celebrities.
When it comes to Hef and everything that went on in the house and his businesses, it's really hard to find vital information. Aside from word of mouth and the Secrets of Playboy series, Hef was and still is able to control his image just enough to still be regarded as somewhat of a wholesome guy. For the final acts of his long-lived legacy is to be buried next to the icon Marilyn Monroe, who is regarded as the most beautiful sex symbol. He started his legacy with Marilyn and he wants to end his legacy with Marilyn. Interesting enough, he has never met Marilyn and she was actually the first ever issue of Playboy, unbeknownst to her. She posed nude under an assumed name for $50. After she became a star, Hef bought the rights to those photos for $500 from a calendar company. That magazine became a bestseller and it launched his empire. His final wish was to be laid next to her.
Do you feel like you missed out by not being able to have her here in your home?
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes.
If you could have had her here in her home, what would you have done here?
Well, I certainly would have told her how much she meant to me. And means to me still.
Hefner tells me he was starting his career in Chicago when Monroe was selected as the first Playmate of the month. The movie star's sensual snapshots were published in the first issue of Playboy magazine in December 1953.
I feel a double connection to her because she was the launching key to the beginning of Playboy. We were both born in 1926. She would have been, if she had lived, she would be 86.
Did you really not know her?
Because it was the beginning of Playboy.
Yet the deep connection he feels inspired him to make his final resting place right next to Monroe's at the Westwood Village Memorial Park.
I will be laid to rest there as well, in a vault right next to hers.
How important is that for you?
Well, I certainly has a very kind of completion notion to it. Yeah, I will be spending the rest of eternity with Marilyn.
Laying next to a woman he has never met and made millions from. Story of Marilyn's life, who hasn't been able to fully rest in peace because of the obsession people have with her. And Hugh has been the finalizing figure to invade her legacy by instilling himself in it. A lot of people blame the women, but I want you guys to just imagine yourself at 18 to 20. It's easier to make decisions that are regrettable later on. But let me know what you guys think down below about Hugh Hefner and his Playboy legacy. Thanks for tuning in. Toodles.